Hi again, here we are to continue talking about the JavaScript slideshow. And if you recall in the last tutorial, we set up our basic HTML page and we downloaded our images and we're all ready to go. So the first step of the tutorial is just to set up the markup and the styles that will arrange things the way that we want to see them and the way that our slideshow is going to need them to be set up to function correctly, right? So what are we going to do? In the body tag here, I'm going to add a little bit of markup for my slideshow. So I'll start with a div, okay? And I'll give this div an ID name, okay? So I'll call it slides, okay? And this will be a container that will have the slideshow in it. So the size and width that you set this container will be the size and the height and width for the slides that we see on the screen. Okay, so we'll give this element an overflow property of hidden, and that'll mean that the slides, when they're kind of lined up left to right, the ones that are outside the area of this box will not be visible. Okay, so in order for this to work now, inside here we'll need another div, and this one we'll give it a class name of slide. How about slides inner? Okay, so this is like the inner slides, right? And this will be sort of, imagine a tray or like a drawer. And what we'll do is inside here we'll line up a bunch of pictures left to right. And to move all the pictures, to make them slide left to right, what we'll do is we'll move this inner slide drawer, right? Okay? And I'll show you an example of that when we set it up, right? So this is our basic markup. And in here, we'll have our image tags, right? So all the images that will be in the slideshow will be here. So let's set those up and see what our page looks like. So I'm going to put source here, and then I'll say, images slash, and then I'll see the images here. Like VS Code kind of code hints me. You can type the names in. It depends on what code editor you're using, but VS Code kind of code hints me files from the folder here. So I'm going to choose all the files that are 1200 by 400, okay? And I'm also going to assign a width of 1200 and a height of 400 here to each image. You can put the alt on here. This is actually supposed to be required, but maybe I'll put it in there anyway, right? Even though it's kind of tedious, but I'll say this is a B, okay? And let me move this stuff out of the way there. And maybe I'll copy this and add another image, and then I'll just change the name here. If you back up over the slash and then hit the slash, it'll give you the file menu again. So I got the B. Oh, this is a beetle. I'll choose that one. Maybe I'll change this to beetle at the end. I'll add another image. Let's see, we'll call this one dandelion. And maybe we'll add a fourth one here. Let's see. Oh, we got ladybug here. Yeah, that looks pretty good, right? Okay, so I've got all my images now. Let's take a look at what this looks like so far, right? So what we've created is this. So I'm going to open up index.html in my browser, and this is what I have, right? So essentially, like, all of the images are within a div, and then they're inside another div, and then they all end up stacking up, right? So they're all stacked up like this. So I don't really want this arrangement. I want them all in a row, running across horizontally. So we see the B, and then this ladybug would be, over here somewhere, right? Okay, so let's make that happen. So to do that, we need to add some CSS styles. So what I'll do is I'll go up here to my style sheet, and there are going to be some styles that are specific to the slideshow and are tied to names, class names that we assign to the slideshow. So whenever anybody uses the slideshow, they'll always have to use particular class names. This is the same way that that Bootstrap works, right? So we're going to just kind of follow their lead. And then there'll be some styles that we apply, like end user or developers styles, right? Like we'll put our own styles in there, and then we can kind of customize the slideshow for ourselves, right? So let's write the slideshow styles, and I'll put a comment here in my style sheet, and we can move this out to its own style sheet later. But just for the example, I'll keep it all together. So we'll say slideshow styles here, right? So these are the slideshow styles. So what we need to do here is the slides inner needs to, let me put a dot here, right? So this is a class name, so we put a dot in front of it. This guy needs to arrange all of its children in sort of a horizontal row. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Flexbox. So I'll say display flex. And then by default, it'll do direction column, like flex direction column, but I think I'll just spell it, or flex direction row. I think I'll just spell it out here. So I'll say flex direction, and we'll make it row. Okay. And then if I go back to my page here and I refresh, you can see all the images are off to the side here, and they're all arranged horizontally. And the width of this div is wider than the page, so the browser shows a scroll bar down here, and it allows me to scroll, but that's actually not what I want. What I want is I want to only show the first image, or like kind of have a window here where these images are visible within that window. And then if I move the slides inner within that window, I'll be able to see them like this, right? So let's do that, right? So the next thing is that slides right here needs to be display. It needs to have a height and width, and then it also needs to have overflow hidden. Okay, so I'm gonna give this guy a class name, and I'll call it how about slideshow, right? And then I'll make a style for this, and so this class name will be specific to our slideshow. And anytime we create a slideshow, we'll have to make a div. It'll have this class name on it, and then it'll have a div inside with this class name and then a list of images. Okay, and then anything else like the ID name or other features we can add can be developer features, so we put them off. Anybody can add those or modify these other things, right? But these things will be fixed for anybody wanting to use the slideshow. Okay, so how's slideshow going to work? Well, I'm going to put a border on this for just to kind of outline like what's happening, right? So I'll say it'll help us visualize what's going on. So I'm going to give it a border. I'll give it a 2-pixel solid. Let's make it a red border so we just see it. And if I do that, what we'll see here is you can see like I've got the red border here, and then it goes all the way out to here, but then stops, right? So it's the width of the page essentially, right? And then inside it, I've got these other things that kind of overflow out of the area of this red box, right? So let's do this now. Let's say, what if we say overflow hidden, right? So this property says that anything that falls outside of the box is not visible. So let's try that, and then we'll see what it looks like here in the browser. And now you can see that I get part of this image here, but then the rest of it that falls outside the box is not visible, and I can't scroll anymore because it gets cropped off, right? And that's kind of what we want, except now we want the red box to just be exactly the size of the first images, or the first image, so the other images are not visible. And then if we move the inner box, they will, kind of appear inside the outer box as if the outer box was kind of like a window, right? Okay, so I've got this. So now what are we going to do? Well, this ID slides right here is kind of, let's say that's our like developer, name, right? So this is a name that anybody who is using your slideshow might work with, right? So I'm going to put the developer styles here, and what I'll say is slides, you're going to have a width of 1200 and a height of 400 pixels, right? Now, what's important about this is if anybody was using our slideshow, they would want the ability to set the height and width of the slides, right? And so we're giving them that here, but they'll have to do it, right? So they'll get to choose what the height and width will be. And then, we'll control that the slideshow element is overflow hidden, right? And we can take this border off too. Maybe I'll even move this border. It seems like this is actually kind of better as a developer, property, right? So someone can decide whether their slideshow has a border or not, right? So I'll put that one here, but this is going to be required, right? We got to have this. So I'm going to put it up here in the slideshow styles, okay? Okay, so that looks pretty good. So I got width and height of 1200 and 400. And if I refresh it here, now you can see my slides look like this, right? And the other images are still over here, kind of running off the page, but they get cropped off at the border here, right? Okay. Let's also, it'd be nice is if the slideshow banner here was kind of in the center of the page, right? So what I think I'll do is I'll give this guy a margin, and you could center this in a lot of ways, but if you give it margin auto, that's like a simple way to put it in the middle of the page, right? So I'll refresh, and now it's in the middle of the page, right? Okay, so that's pretty good for this video. We're kind of started there. We'll stop here, and then in the next video we'll talk about the mechanism used to like make the slides actually slide, right? Okay, so anyway, thanks for watching, and if you have any questions, put them in the comments.